we're talking about elder care, which is an issue that we all hope to be able to deal with. It means that we've been blessed, but if you're ill-prepared, it could be devastating. It could be devastating for the individual. It could be devastating for the family. I'm John Iannuzzi, and I'm joined again by Nancy May. You remember Nancy, of course, on WPKN from the Boardroom's Best podcast, which has caught fire.
Absolutely.
And today you're here to discuss something a little different. Talk to us about this online community that you created revolving around elder care success. That's the name of it, but it's also the mission.
Right. The name of the group, it's on Facebook, is called Eldercare Success. And I actually started it predominantly because I have been taking care of my parents long distance for the last 7+ years now. My dad is 98 years old. Will be 99 in July. My mom is 89 with some memory issues. And over the course of time, I think I have probably dealt with just about every sort of challenge you can run into, from financial fraud and abuse with outside advisors, to problems with AIDS, to problems with assisted living facilities and independent living facilities, doctors, lawyers, accountants, you name it. I think if there's a problem, I have faced it in one way, shape, or another. And as a result, friends who heard my story started to ask me questions. And I said, there's got to be a way to have this conversation in a larger forum and be of support to others so that, frankly, I didn't have to do it one-on-one. I would say the only thing that I haven't had problems with is family issues. I've got one sister who lets me do the job that I need to do. I call her in when we need it, and that's it. I am very fortunate because I've heard horror stories on that front too from all sorts of people.
So you've created an online group. It's called Eldercare Success. Invite folks to check it out.
Yeah, it's on Facebook. It's called Eldercare Success. It's a group on Facebook, and you can join. It's free of charge. The only thing I asked you to do is respond to the 3 questions up front, which are you a caregiver? What are the challenges that you are?
And that in and of itself could mean a lot of different
Absolutely. Things. And, it's called elder care, but it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody who's considered elderly in the eyes of society. It could be anybody who's infirmed. It could be a family member that has taken ill, that all of a sudden trips and falls and has a car accident. I mean, heck, I had to be taken care of myself almost 25 years ago with a car accident where both my legs were broken.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. Dementia creates a whole nother level.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that more in a minute, but I guess part of the reason why I'm even sitting here with you, and part of the reason why I joined the group initially, is my own personal experience watching my mom care for my uncle, who was a World War II veteran, a great, big, strong guy who never had any issues until he did.
Yep.
At 93. And had she not taken the steps that she took, and basically she gave her what was remaining of her free time. I just had a daughter. My sister has 5 kids, so she spread quite thin, and she gave what was remaining of her free time to make sure that my uncle did not spend his final months in a facility where he did not want to be. Correct. There are some folks who do want to be in these facilities, and we'll talk more about what makes for a decent facility, but also to make sure that the money that he had worked so hard to save over his lifetime was not depleted, in the blink of an eye, which can happen.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about how you can make sure that you protect what your elderly loved ones have so that it's not just drained in their final months.
Well, you mentioned final months. It actually could be years. True. So the whole process that I've seen and the way we got into it, or the way I got into it, was as being an oldest daughter, it creeped up over time. Mom started to have some memory issues that were not evident. But there are actually 2 ways that this can happen to a family member who becomes a caregiver. It comes on slowly, like it did with me and my parents, or it comes on all of a sudden like it did with your mom's uncle. And so the cost really matters, have to be addressed in 2 different ways when they come on. So we've been dealing with for 7 years. The aides that we deal with are 24/7. Sometimes we have to overlap them. I looked at what the actual dollar cost was for round-the-clock care for my parents this past year, because I'm dealing with taxes right now.
In their home.
In their home, $124,000 and change, almost $125,000 just last year. Now, when they were in assisted living, mom started to have falls. We started at about $35,000 a month. This is assisted living, so it's not full nursing care. And this is in Florida. And when mom started to have falls and other issues, we went up to $30,000 a month overnight. $30,000 a month times 12 times 7 adds up very quickly.
Yeah, it sure
7
does.
years, yeah.
And again, this is money. This is what they've saved their entire life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And most parents want to be able to have something to leave to the next generation, and it's going to be impossible. We talk in the financial world about this current generation being the largest transfer of wealth in history, when in fact I think that's absolutely incorrect. The money is there, but the money will evaporate very quickly.
And I hate to use the term burden. And in a previous conversation you and I had, I used a poor choice of words, and that is that it's like caring for children. It's really not. It's
they're adults.
Yeah, and it's so much more nuanced and complex. But I guess the thought is that once independence is not an option anymore, people have to decide what route they want to take. Money chooses that a lot of the time.
Well, it may not necessarily be money. Most people, on average, they say 80% of the population really wants to age in place or age in their home. However, families may not necessarily be able to accommodate an older person to say, I want mom and dad to stay in their home, when there's no way for them to understand how to take care of them. My parents are in Florida. We figured this out over time, and I have a great team of 5 aides. I've got 5. I run them like a team, and we do monthly calls. We do monthly Skype calls or Zoom calls where we're on the phone, on video. We're going over daily chores. We're going over issues that might have cropped up from the month before. I have them all on an instant message group, and we do weekly check-ins, daily check-ins. I get, hello, this is what's going on. That's it.
So it is possible even from 1,000 miles away.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. The way that and this is my own experience, the only way that this has worked for me is I run it like a business. Yeah, I call it Mom and Dad Inc. It's a tight ship. Otherwise, it becomes consuming. And sometimes it does. I'm dealing with tax season right now. It's a little overwhelming.
I'm glad you brought that up. Working on a news story for WPKN, because there's so many scams, and
Yes.
they target the elderly.
Oh, we've unraveled those too.
Talk to us a little bit about how out in the wilderness and how ripe for this type of scam an elderly person could be without an advocate.
Well, even with an advocate, it can happen. So I'll give you a prime example that in our own home, my dad is fabulous, a World War II vet. He's been a kind, giving man over time. And when you've got somebody in your home day in and day out that you become familiar with, it's easy to hear the stories of, I call it the woe is me, from an aide that may be a little less financially well off, or presume that the parent is that you care for is better endowed from a financial perspective.
So you're referring now to people who are there to help.
Yeah,
home health
absolutely.
aides in the
home.
already in the home.
Absolutely. So there's theft that happens. There's well-intentioned support that a parent may say, Susie, you need some help. Let me write you a check. And that happens. Or it could be a family member. We had a family member in my husband's family who embezzled $80,000 a year that we know of from a grandfather.
So this is why the group that you created, and again, we're speaking with Nancy May. The group online is called Eldercare Success. It's on Facebook. It's growing. It's an opportunity for folks in this position to get advice, right? Mm-hmm. To find comfort, I'm assuming, I mean,
It's a network of others who are going through the same thing that can also share their own experiences. We have some great people in there. There's some attorneys that are going through it themselves, that are online, that are providing support and asking for help. We've got some world-class athletes that are in there, doctors themselves who have gotten into taking care of their parents and are dealing with managing their own practices, and business professionals like you and me.
So this is a great place to visit and to get familiar and to get information and to offer information and discuss your experiences. Because as Nancy was just explaining, in my own personal case, I watched my mom let her guard down, and the home health aide, monitored how she would sign checks and what her signature looked like. And over time, we had a case of identity fraud.
Oops. It happens. So you look at the size of the population. I think this is what we need to understand as a society too, is that the over 60 population is expected to reach the 30% of the industrialized nations, the size of the market.
Give that statistic again.
Yeah, so it's the over 60 population is expected to reach 30% in industrialized nations. So that will be the largest population segment in the world, when you think about it.
Advancements in medicine, advancements in how we're able to care for ourselves.
We live longer. There's actually a housing shortage right now that they're saying with millennials trying to get into homes because we're staying in our homes longer and we don't want to give them up. So that's a big challenge. The growth in new home building is slowed down because we don't need them, but we do. And then you've got 20 to 30% of what is the number? It's actually 20 to 32% of the workforce will actually leave their job to take care of somebody. So what does that mean to corporations who are trying to figure out how do you keep the best and brightest working in their employee?
It's amazing. It really is. And it's something that maybe you don't give thought to until you're in the position.
Absolutely.
As an employer or as someone who needs to take a hiatus.
Yeah. And if mom or dad made $125,000 a year over the course of their lifetime, but enjoyed their life, you didn't put away $125,000 a year. You paid for college, you paid for food, you paid for cars, you paid for your mortgage. What's left over when in fact 24/7 care at an inexpensive rate is $124,000 a year.
But I'll tell you, my grandfather passed with nothing.
Yep.
And had my mom not stepped in with my uncle, who amassed, a decent savings,
Sure.
he would have been in the same boat anyway.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't have made a difference. But
long-term care does help if insurance, if it's used properly. But my challenge with long-term care is that if you don't have somebody to administer it and actually get the reimbursements that somebody needs, then that goes unused.
It's a tremendous responsibility.
It is a responsibility. Every month I have to put in accounting of the hours that we're using in AIDS and get a percentage of that to cover some of those costs.
I'd be curious to see in elder care success in this group, and as it grows, opportunities. I'd like to see opportunities for people like you to meet people in the same position. And also, you mentioned you had a sister who readily admits she's grateful that you're doing this because she would not be as equipped to do it, correct?
Correct. She's one child herself who's a terrific young man, but has been a special learning need child over the course of his time in school. He's in early years of high school, and that's taken a big toll on her and her husband out in the Midwest. She doesn't understand the legal components of what goes on. She doesn't have the network that I do. She doesn't have the backbone sometimes to push back when you need to in a way that has a certain level of diplomacy and knowing when to be the aggressor with a medical team when you're not getting what you want or have questions.
When it comes time to make the decision, talk to us a little bit about, and feel free to share stories from some of the other people in the group as well, or when is it time to say, you know what, at home is not working, we do need to look for a facility, and what should folks look for? New drapes and a view of, a river is not necessarily going to make a difference. I've seen wonderful facilities that look like hotels. That's the term I keep hearing.
Yes.
This looks like a hotel.
It's beautiful. And they market very well on aesthetics and food, I've seen. But on average, it's interesting.
What really matters
is there somebody there that's going to be on top of things for your parent when they need it? In assisted living facilities and independent care facilities, the number of staff members that they need per person varies depending upon the license. I don't have those numbers in front of me, and it also depends on state by state. But on average, if you're in an independent facility, I believe or an assisted living facility, it's one staff member for every 12 residents. So think about some of the issues.
I'm shaking my head.
Exactly.
By the way, yeah.
Think about some of the issues that we had in Florida a couple of years ago with the major hurricanes and the evacuations. If you've got one person for every 12 elderly people in a facility, how are you going to get them out when there's a fire, when there's a hurricane that's coming along and the roof is being torn out, or you need to evacuate them? And those caregivers inside those facilities have families of their own. If it were me, I'd say, adios, amigos. My family is going to be there that needs that help and care. You guys are on your own. You're SOL. Go for it. See I can get a job anyplace else that I want
to. And the compensation is not commensurate with what they're putting in most of the time.
It's not high. It's a low paying job on average for being a home health care worker. So
it's also one of the fastest growing fields. There is the need
is huge. I had read a statistic. It wasn't in the United States, but I think in Sweden alone, they're shy something like almost 1 million caregivers. I mean, it's some ridiculous number that's out there. In Florida, I saw recently that there's an issue not just on aides, but on nurses. So there are 700 nurses who have not been able to pay back their student loans. And they're risking losing their license.
Wow.
That's nurses.
There's a gender issue at play, too.
I'm
noticing more and more men considering that field. I was at Starbucks. I was online at Starbucks, and this one guy was giving this other guy a hard time. And I turned around and I said to him, this guy, if he goes through with it and becomes an RN and becomes a home health care aide, will always have work. He'll never be out of work.
Correct. Right.
So that to change that perception, because there's just not enough people.
Well, and a home health care aide is different, obviously, than a nurse. A nurse has a certain set of licenses. In the home health care aide market, there are people who call themselves aides that are not what they call CNA, Certified Nursing Assistants. And the only amount of education that you need is about a 600-hour course.
Yeah, see, that might be a problem.
Yeah. So it's relatively small in Florida, I know, because I offered to give one of my aides some support to go through the course. It was a $300 course. Said, you go through the course, I'm happy to pay for it. And she said, no, I want to pay for this myself. I want to know I can do it on my own. I think that's fabulous. She took that responsibility.
So where is the oversight coming from? These individual people who employ these aides?
Correct. So there are agencies that you can get an aide through an agency.
Like babysitters.
Exactly. So there are home health care agencies. They do companion work. A companion does not need to be certified. Quite frankly, an aide doesn't need to be certified. There's no rules and regulations. What you want is somebody in your home that's going to be compassionate, that is not going to be fraudulent. So background checks are important to have. Drug tests are real important. You want to know
reliable.
Just because an agency says they do this doesn't mean they do. We had worked with an agency in Florida that we were forced to work through with the first facility that my parents were living in because they didn't want to be a burden to my sister and I. That was my parents' goal. And I appreciate that, and I love them for that. But the facility that they were in was just not right. Mom was having TIAs, mini strokes, having problems not seeing out of an eye. And when I went down, I nicknamed everybody down there for one reason or another. Nurse Ratchet was the head nurse.
You've told me this before.
There was the Tourette's doctor who came in. Another
Did he
story.
have Tourette's?
No, he had a very bad stuttering.
Okay.
He couldn't get the words out. It took him literally probably 5 minutes to get 3 words out. And I had the patience to sit there and listen because I knew about this beforehand. But I don't know how somebody like that can actually work with an older person and be of assistance.
Communication is hard.
But it's critical, right?
Yeah.
So the nurse.
You mentioned strokes.
Yeah.
My dad has had several strokes, and he has hearing issues, and communication is
Yeah.
a major problem.
A major problem. And the hearing aids are usually not comfortable, and they don't want to wear them, and it makes them feel older. But
I wonder sometimes.
Nurse Ratchet was the one who told me, it's the head nurse, who said, Mrs. May is not our issue. And I said, wait a second, I'm paying $30,000 a month, and she's not your issue? She's not your problem? You know, I mean, what gives here?
So I guess the question is, if you can give us 2 or 3 things to look for right out of the gate that should be red flags.
Oh, God, 2 or 3 things. I can give you a bucket load. And if you're talking about facilities? Or...
Yeah.
So,
because we've already, in this conversation, we've already established that if it's you've reached, the person listening has reached the point where taking care at home is just not feasible.
Right. It may not be feasible. So the first red flag, I would say, is when you go visit your parents or your mom or your dad or both of them, when you walk into their own apartment, because everybody has their own apartments, like apartment living. Smell what it smells. I mean, take a good sniff. What does it smell like? Does it smell clean? Does it smell like urine? These facilities will have housekeepers that come in once or twice a week. They do light housekeeping, which means taking a dust mop and changing sheets and towels. That's it. But if it smells bad, you know you've got a problem. The other is watch mom and dad's weight. Are they going up? Is it going down? My mom went from 150 pounds on average ballpark down to less than 98 pounds.
I mean, that could be catastrophic.
If we didn't take them out of there, mom would be dead. She would not be alive today. Yeah. Absolutely.
The overall cleanliness of the facility.
Cleanliness of the facility. Most facilities will look clean and beautiful from the outside, but
the lobby at least.
Absolutely. What does the facility, the actual apartment where your parents are, smell and look like? Is it clean? Does it smell good? Does it smell sanitary? Is it dirty? Is it dark? If it's dark all the time, the heat is up way high, you know something's not being monitored and going on. Mom and dad are cold. Are they getting depressed? What's happening? Watch for depression.
Yeah. Well, wow, sure.
Big issue. And they may have lots of activities. The lights may be on everywhere else, but they may not be going out because in my parents' case, my dad did not, quote unquote, want to be considered an old fart. That's his term. Yeah. He still uses that term at 98 years old. Dad, guess what? You're kind of old, although I haven't told him.
So how often is a good amount of time to check in?
I check in as often as you can.
Daily?
Well, if they're local, probably not. I mean, you can go in daily if that's what you want to do, but pop in as frequently. It's
training. It is training.
Just pop in as frequently as you can. My parents were down in Florida, so I would go down every 3 months, every 4 months. Now I go down every 2 months on average. Okay. So, it's been a while since I've been down there, but I was down several times over the holidays because my dad had health issues.
Nancy, this support group, one more time, is a place for people to learn, but also because, as we just said, it is draining. So you need support.
Absolutely. It's exhausting. And in fact, I just did a video, which we haven't posted on the group yet, on stress for caregivers. And you may not even know that you're going through it because you deal with it day in and day out. And as I explained in the little short clip, that I looked up what stress was in a caregiver because a couple of people had said to me after the passing of their parents, and they're still in the group, that they believe that they have PTSD from it. And I thought that was only something that military warriors went through, not caregivers. And sure enough, I looked at some of the signs of severe stress, and oh my God, that's me. I'm like getting up in the middle of the night.
I believe it, absolutely.
Right? I'm thinking about it. This morning I woke up at 4:00 and I couldn't go back to sleep, and I'm bouncing around in bed, and I said, all right, I'll just get up anyway. I'm normally an early riser. At 4:00's a little early for me. And I don't have a new baby, so I'm okay. Like you.
She hopefully, I'm going to archive this program so she could listen to this when it comes time for her to take care of me.
Yeah.
My daughter, that is.
We'll have a whole series of tips and playbooks for her by then.
Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier. I have seen people who are caregivers trying to enjoy a meal and the phone is ringing and it's the healthcare. They can't get in the house. The elderly person fell. It just never ends. And my uncle did have dementia near the end, and he had the ability to pick up the phone. So he would call 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
Let's go for breakfast. 2 o'clock
A little early, Dad.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is we had some signs of what looked like dementia issues with my dad over the holidays, and it was a little disconcerting because he had no sign of this before. It turned out that he had a UTI, urinary tract infection, which
diabetes sometimes could confuse the issue.
Absolutely. So there are signs and symptoms that mimic the dementia or Alzheimer's symptoms that may not necessarily be related.
I think that would be a good next show, perhaps.
Absolutely. And people have to understand that Alzheimer's is different than the term dementia. Dementia is a description of a series of symptoms that are related all under memory issues.
Alzheimer's is a degenerative disease.
Right. And there are different types of Alzheimer's out there as well.
Dementia, I know stroke. It's a side effect. It's one of the lovely things that you have to deal with, after a TIA.
Well, a TIA is what they call a mini stroke. There's some sort of brain bleed that happens. But just because you had a stroke doesn't necessarily mean that you end up with dementia per se. I've got there's a friend that I know whose mom was a pediatrician and had a stroke, and her memory and brain is very strong. She just has a few speech problems now.
Motor skills.
Yeah, motor skills. Absolutely.
Maybe on the next show too, we can invite some experts to join us.
Absolutely. Be happy to call on a few folks and we can bring them into the show.
So we're going to share this with folks on WPKN in Bridgeport. We're going to put this on our YouTube channel. I'd like for you very much to share it on Eldercare Success's site. Is there any other information you want to give out before we say goodbye for this episode?
I would say come join us at the Eldercare Success group on Facebook. Like I said, it's free to join. Just answer the 3 questions. We're there as a group to help. We are all caregivers in some way, shape, or form. And I'm always looking for good people to provide some additional support to those. We're all talented professionals in there. We're not helpless souls.
And on the YouTube page, if folks look down in the description, I'll put the link.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Nancy May, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, John.
Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell, announcing a new crime show on Mondays at 6 p.m. on 1490 WGCH. All talk and all crime. The nation's biggest murderers were the go-to source for the Moxley murder and the Skakel appeals, financial crimes on Wall Street, inside the crimes of Russia's Putin, and more. The facts, the forensics, the inside stories. From the host of Business Talk with Jim Campbell, it's Forensic Talk with Jim Campbell. All talk and all crime, Mondays at 6 p.m. right after the Lisa Wexler Show on 1490 WGCH and WGCH.com anywhere.